Sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, liebe Gäste, ganz herzlich willkommen in der Europäischen Akademie Berlin. Ich freue mich, dass Sie heute gekommen sind. Die Veranstaltungen, die wir heute Abend hier haben, haben eine lange Tradition, finden bereits seit 2003 in Kooperation mit B.A.T.I statt, der Initiative der Europäischen Türken in Berlin e.V. Und auch heute werden wir die Diskussion sehr ernst nehmen mit dem diesjährigen Redner, Professor Hakan Yavuz, und mit Ihnen, unseren Gästen. Die werden wir in den Mittelpunkt stehen. Das Thema kennen Sie bereits, die Ursprünge der ethnischen Konflikte auf dem Balkan und des armenisch-türkischen Streits. Ich möchte die Gelegenheit nutzen, an dieser Stelle mit Herrn Sorget, den Vorsitzenden von B.A.T.I e.V. zu begrüßen und natürlich Professor Yavuz, der uns gleich in seinem Vortrag über seine Forschung zum heutigen Thema informieren wird. Ist Herr Başarşen anwesend? Ja? Dann darf ich Sie auch ganz herzlich begrüßen, den Generalkonsul der Türkischen Republik, Ahmet Başarşen. Herzlich willkommen in der Europäischen Akademie Berlin. And Professor Yavuz, welcome to the European Academy Berlin and thank you for joining us tonight. Noch ein paar Worte zum Ablauf. Wir werden einen kurzen Vortrag hören, circa 15 Minuten. Danach wird eine Podiumsdiskussion stattfinden zwischen uns beiden, die wir dann auch recht bald für das Publikum, für Sie öffnen wollen, damit Sie auch alle die Gelegenheit haben, Fragen zu stellen und mit uns zu diskutieren. Im Anschluss werden wir dann noch die Gelegenheit haben, zusammen uns zu treffen bei einem kleinen Imbiss und Getränken im Hauptgebäude drüben. Viele von Ihnen kennen das schon. Und ich freue mich auch, Sie dazu begrüßen zu können. Meine Damen und Herren, natürlich ist das Thema des Abends kein Zufall. Wir haben am vergangenen Freitag, dem 100. Jahrestag des Beginns der Deportation von Armenierinnen und Armeniern gedacht, die in dem Tod Hunderttausender, die Schätzung reichen bis weit über 1 Million, unter grausamsten Bedingungen endeten. Zu den Opfern zählten auch zahlreiche Aramäer und Pontos-Griechen. Es handelt sich dabei zweifelsohne um eines der dunkelsten Kapitel des 20. Jahrhunderts. Es handelt sich um Gewalttaten, die man nur registrieren kann, die man erinnern muss und die einen doch verständnislos zurücklassen, auch wenn man sie versucht zu verstehen. Neben vielen Gedenkveranstaltungen, die am vergangenen Freitag weltweit stattfanden und vielen Abendveranstaltungen und Diskussionsrunden, unter anderem in Berlin, steht auch der heutige Abend im Schatten des Todes und des Leids, das ein ganzes Volk erfasste. Wir wollen heute Abend bewusst nicht das Hauptaugenmerk auf die Frage richten, ob es sich bei diesen Verbrechen um einen Genozid handelt. Diese Frage dominiert sicherlich und auch zu Recht einen großen Teil der Berichterstattung. Und viele Akteure haben sich bereits geäußert, auch der Deutsche Bundestag und die deutsche Bundesregierung haben sich dazu durchgerungen, diesen Begriff zu verwenden. Ganz werden und wollen wir um das Thema nicht herumkommen. Dafür ist die Auseinandersetzung darüber zu zentral für den armenisch-türkischen Streit und auch für die Möglichkeit der Versöhnung zwischen den beiden Nationen, die wir heute auch ins Zentrum rücken wollen. Und Professor Yavuz wird in wenigen Momenten über einen Teil der Geschichte referieren, die all dem vorgelagert ist und den Kontext für all das darstellt, was dann folgte. Ja, ich bedanke mich erstmal für Ihre Aufmerksamkeit. Herr Sorgic wird noch ein Grußwort an Sie richten und wir werden dann fortfahren mit dem Vortrag von Dr. Yavuz, den ich auch noch kurz vorstellen darf im Anschluss. Dankeschön.
Ja, sehr geehrter Herr Generalkonsul, Frau Gattin, sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, Herr Professor Yavuz. Lassen Sie mich mal kurz erstmal unseren Verein vorstellen. Wir sind, eigentlich stimmt der Name nicht mehr im Großen und Ganzen, wenn ich hier sehe, Initiative der Europäischen Türken Berlin. Vielleicht sollte man irgendwann mal sich als Verband, als Verein darüber mehr oder weniger Gedanken machen, ob das nicht besser wäre, das Ganze so weit zu ändern. Wir sind nicht mehr die europäischen Türken, wir sind die in Deutschland lebende türkeistämmige Menschen, türkeistämmige Deutschen mittlerweile. Und da hat sich auch seitdem vieles verändert. Und natürlich in diesem Sinne interessiert uns, was unserem Heimatland, Mutterland Türkei interessiert. Es interessiert uns genauso gut auch als türkeistämmige Deutsche, was tut sich in unserem ehemaligen Heimatland oder in unserem Mutterland, weil wir sind derzeit in unserem Vaterland. Deutschland sagen Vaterland, in der Türkei wird das Ganze als Mutterland bezeichnet. Also wir sind hin und her ein bisschen zerrissen, hin und her gerissen und natürlich haben wir besonders in den letzten Wochen diese Ereignisse über die Medien verfolgt und wir sind alle ziemlich betroffen. Dieses Thema interessiert uns sehr. Ist es ein Genozid? Ist es kein Genozid? Einige Länder haben ja gesagt, andere nicht. Ich persönlich bin nicht der Historiker, der in der Lage ist, diese Frage zu beantworten, aber ich halte es für sinnvoll, bestimmte Themen den Historikern zu überlassen und das ist ein politisch sehr brisantes Thema. Übrigens vielleicht, Herr Dr. Ebeling, Korrektur, es sind nicht nur Armenier, Aramäer und Pontus, Griechen dabei gestorben. Es sind sehr, sehr viele, Hunderttausende auch Muslime gestorben. Es war leider eine Tragödie, die uns alle betroffen hat. Es waren, man muss ja mehr oder weniger exakt 100 Jahre zurückgehen und die Geschichte dann verfolgen. Und ich denke, das werden wir mehr oder weniger erfahren. Ich wünsche uns ein sehr konstruktives Gespräch, welches uns vielleicht in diesem Thema ein Tick bisschen mehr hilft, mehr Licht in diese Dunkelheit zu bringen. Und das ist das, was wir uns wünschen. Und wir werden auch als B.A.T.I-Verband, als B.A.T.I-Verein weiterhin in diesem Sinne Themen, die unser Mutterland betreffen, Themen, die uns das Mutterland, unser Mutterland Türkei näher heranführt an Europa, weiterhin thematisieren und weiterhin gemeinsam hier diskutieren, mit dem Ziel, konstruktiv dazu einen Beitrag zu leisten. Vielen Dank und gutes, konstruktives Gespräch wünsche ich. Danke sehr.
Ja, vielen Dank, Herr Sorgic. Vielen Dank auch für die Ergänzung. Das ist natürlich auch, glaube ich, ein Thema der heutigen Veranstaltung, keinen Wettbewerb des Leids aufkommen zu lassen und in dem Sinne auch keine Opfer der vielen Gewalttaten, die während dieser Auseinandersetzung, während der Kriege, während der gewaltsamen Auseinandersetzung auf dem Gebiet des Osmanischen Reiches und auf dem Balkan stattgefunden haben, unter den Tisch fallen zu lassen. Die Betonung der Opfer, die ich genannt habe, ergibt sich auch aus dem Gedenkkorridor, in dem wir uns befinden, nach dem 24.04. am vergangenen Freitag. Ich freue mich jetzt, Herrn Professor Yavuz begrüßen zu dürfen und nochmal vorstellen zu dürfen. Er ist Professor für Politikwissenschaft an der University of Utah. Er hat zunächst in Ankara studiert, wo er einen Abschluss in Politikwissenschaft von der, entschuldigen Sie bitte meine Aussprache, Siyasal Bilgiler Fakültesi erlangte. Dankeschön, zu gnädig. Etwas, aber ohne Korrekturmöglichkeit. Also ich habe es mir zurechtgelegt. Er setzte dann seine Bildungskarriere in den USA fort und promovierte 1998 an der University of Wisconsin-Madison. Er hat zahlreiche Bücher geschrieben und Artikel verfasst. 2 Titel seiner Bücher darf ich kurz erwähnen. Toward an Islamic Enlightenment, The Gülen Movement, erschien 2013 bei Oxford University Press. Und zum anderen Islamic Political Identity in Turkey, erschien 2003 bei Cambridge University Press. Neben seinen Artikeln, die er in ausgewiesenen Zeitschriften veröffentlicht hat, darf ich auch noch erwähnen, dass ihm zahlreiche prestigeträchtige Fellowships zuteil wurden. Und wir haben mit ihm einen ausgewiesenen Experten für die Geschichte der Balkankriege und des Osmanischen Reiches bei uns. Und wir dürfen uns sehr auf Ihren Vortrag freuen. Vielen Dank. The floor is yours. Is it on?
Hold that, I can see.
It doesn't seem to be.
Yeah.
Apologies for the delay. Entschuldigen Sie die kurze Unterbrechung. Eben hat das noch funktioniert. So ist es immer, wenn man Veranstaltungen hat. Man bereitet alles vor und testet. Und am Ende muss man doch einen Moment länger warten. Ja.
How is that? It's coming. Technical.
Ah, wunderbar.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thanks again, and I would like to thank B.A.T.I Association, Nihat and IHAM Base, and also thanks Berlin. What I would like to do today is to examine the debate. The debate is very much between two different historiographies, two competing and conflicting historiography, what happened in Anatolia, in other words, what happened to Armenians. Today's Republic of Turkey, during World War I, before World War I, I would say in 1914, 20% of population used to be Christian. And today we even do not have 1%. So I think this is an important question. People usually ask what happened to those Christian minority. But to understand what happened to Christians in Anatolia, we need to also understand what happened to the Bulgaria used to be 50% Muslim. Salonika, the city where the founding father of the Republic born, used to be 42% Muslim, 30% Jewish, and today there is none, no Jews and no Muslims left. In Belgrade, the Serbia the city used to have in 1914 around 15% Muslim. Today there is even not 1% Muslim population in Belgrade. The capital of Yerevan used to, in 1908, according to Ronald Grigor Suni, according to his own study, the capital city of the Republic of Armenia used to have 32% Shia Azeri Muslim population, and today there is none. So what we have here is a general process, a pattern. And I would like to talk about this pattern, the causes of the problem. What happened, why happened, and how happened. Because what we see, people tend to focus on only what happened in Anatolia. They ignore what took place in the Balkans. To understand what happened in Anatolia, we have to understand what happened in the Balkans, because the people who ran the World War I and created modern Turkish Republic came from Macedonia, from Bulgaria, from Bosnia-Herzegovina. According to Eric Zurcher, he is a leading, one of the leading historians of contemporary Turkey. He has a wonderful chapter in this book. I edited it. He argues that until 1962, over half of the cabinet members of the Republic were born in the Balkans. So what we are talking about, the Republic of Turkey, in fact, a republic of refugees, a republic created by the children of refugees until 1960. And Mustafa Kemal, he was born in today's Greece, raised in today's Macedonia, but then he became a founding father of the Republic of Turkey. And I would say, even though it is called a Republic of Turkey, but if you go by ethnicity, it is not necessarily Turk, but rather Muslim refugees forced out of the Caucasus and Balkans and came to Anatolia and around Islam, they created what we call Turk. But that name Turk very much also given by outside. So this will be very much the gist of my talk, to understand what happened in Anatolia. We need to focus on what took place in the Balkans, because the Balkans, what happened in the Balkans, shaped the socialization mentality and cognitive map and the strategies of the young Turks who were very much in charge of World War I. So this is the gist of my talk, and what I'm trying to argue here is that the nation-building process, unfortunately, wasn't a clean process. Wherever you look in the Balkans, the Greece, for instance, used to, in 1820, today's Greece used to have around 30% Muslim population. And today, I think the Muslim population is only 2 in the Western Thrace, 2 or 3%. So there is a pattern of ethnic cleansing. In other words, what I am trying to argue, that homogenization or nation building in the Balkans was somewhat different than what took place in Europe. But to understand what really happened, there is 2 concepts. One is Eastern question. Second concept is Orientalism. The Ottoman Empire wasn't an Middle Eastern empire. It wasn't an Anatolian empire. First and foremost, it was a Balkan empire. In other words, the Ottomans were captured or conquered Sarajevo before they conquered today's Trabzon or Van or Diyarbakir. So it was, in fact, a Southern European empire, and the institutions of this empire and the elite of this empire very much the children of the Balkans. So this is one of the facts that the Ottoman Empire wasn't an Arab empire, it wasn't an Anatolian empire, it was a Balkan reality and Balkan empire. And they were in charge, or the Ottomans were in control of the Balkans before they captured Constantinople, or today's Istanbul, in 1453. Now, when we look at this reality, so what happened to the Muslims? I think the big question we need to ask, what happened to Muslim population in the Balkans? When we answer that question, it will help us to understand what took place to Christian minorities in Anatolia. So there is a learning process. There is a nation-building process, and Turkey was the last nation-building process that took place within the boundaries of the Ottoman Empire. So what happened in, I would say, in Anatolia very much informed and shaped what took place in the Balkans. In the Balkans, there are 3 major wars, very critical. One is 1877-1878 war. It was the age of the rivalry of empires. Germany joined this imperialist rivalry much later. It was very much the competition, Austria-Hungary, Ottoman Empire, Russia, and to some extent France and Britain. These empires were in competition in the Balkans, and it was the high age of imperialism, and imperialist powers, they were very much in charge of India. Most of the Muslim population in the 19th century colonized. Colonialism was the fact, but the Balkans and Anatolia, and to some extent today's Middle East, used to be under the Ottoman rule, so it created some problem for the European powers, and the Ottoman Empire was in decline. What to do with the Ottoman Empire, a Muslim elite, governing majority population Christian? So this very much raised or framed in terms of the Eastern question. So the Eastern question means what to do with the Muslims in the Balkans, how to end or carve Ottoman territories. I think this is one of the key issues we need to focus on, that the European powers, especially again Russia and Britain, they were competing over Ottoman territories, and each side trying to use different minorities. Now they are trying to exploit these minorities, and some of the elite of these minorities were also trying to exploit the competition of these major powers. But the Ottoman Empire, it was not a nation state. It was a multicultural, multi-religious entity, and the empire tried to remain that way. And what we see that in the Balkans, Eastern question meant how to get rid of the Ottoman Empire, and the European powers usually they created state first as a solution to Eastern question, and these states usually had royal families, mostly common some of the German royal families, or from Belgium, some from the Britain. The royal families were also exported to these countries. And now you have the state like Serbia, Bulgaria, or Montenegro, but the states now, they seek to homogenize their population. Homogenization or nation building in Europe took place as a result of industrial revolution. It was the industrial revolution in Europe, in France or in Britain, in Germany, had to get rid of differences and homogenize and had to build a nation. Whereas in the Balkans, nation building they did not try to build a nation through the industrialization, but the war became a function of homogenization. In other words, these new states created in the Balkans, they tried to become a nation, homogenize their population through war making. War became a function of nation building in the Balkans because the war allowed these governing elite to homogenize the population, mobilize the population, also take the land, most of the land, what is known as the çiftlik, or the major landowners in the Balkans, used to be Muslims, indigenous Muslim population of that region. These are not Turk by ethnicity. We are talking about the Muslim Bosnians, Turbesh, Pomak, Gorani. These are different Slavic population. They became very much Muslim under the Ottoman rule. And these states, they tried to again homogenize through war making, and the war created an opportunity space for these states to ethnically cleanse the Muslims. And the European major powers didn't care, or most of them, Great Britain, Russia, and France, supported these ethnic cleansing. Because during this period also the Ottomans and German empires became much close because Ottomans didn't have much option to protect the territorial integrity, but to ally itself with another major European power at that time. So what you have, that the nationalism in Europe very much carried through industrialization, whereas nation building and homogenization very much carried through war making in the Balkans. That meant getting rid of Muslim minorities or Muslim majority population. And the young Turks, what is referred as a group of politicians, intellectuals, they were not necessarily Turk in ethnic sense. Albanians, Bosnians, Arabs, and most prominent were the Kurds, Abdullah Cevdet. But they are called Young Turk because their major concern was how to save the state and how to create a homeland for these forced, ethnically cleansed Muslim population. And the Young Turks, even though the first generation of the young Turks born in Istanbul, but the second generation, Talat Pasha, Enver Pasha, and Bahattin Shakir, they were the children of Macedonia, and most of them, their education, military training, socialization very much took place in the Balkans and in the midst of these ethnic cleansing and warfare. And eventually these young Turks controlled the state in 1913. The young Turks became the dominant force of the Republic of, not the Republic, but the Ottoman Empire, I'm sorry, Ottoman Empire. And the first Balkan Wars, again here, after 1877-78 war, second major war was the first Balkan Wars, then the second Balkan Wars. And during 1912 and 1913, Ottoman Empire lost 80% of its territories in Europe. It also lost around 70% of population in the Balkans. So it was a collapse of time. It was major trauma for the Ottoman Empire, the first and second Balkan Wars. And what you have in the this trauma of first and second Balkan War turned Istanbul into a city of refugees. The mosques, churches, schools. According to Justin McCarthy, 2.3 million people in 1913 forced out of their homes. And according to, again, Justin McCarthy, 365,000 Muslims were killed and murdered during 1912 and 1913, First and Second Balkan War. The World War I for the Ottoman Empire was not the World War I, it was the Third Balkan War. Because the first one in 1912, and then the second one 1913, and World War I comes after the Second Balkan War in 1914. And for the Ottomans, they didn't have option but to enter this war. At that time in 1914, today's Anatolia again had around, in eastern Anatolia, had 30% in 6 major provinces used to be Armenian Christian. The Armenian Christian population in 1914, again, the figure very much disputed by different scholars, but the population used to be around 1.5 million Armenians used to live in today's eastern and southern Anatolia. This was the Armenian population. But when the war started, after the Second Balkan Wars, Armenians came to conclusion that the Ottoman Empire, not the sick man of Europe, but the dying man of Europe. The empire was collapsing, and the Armenians made a rational decision to ally themselves with Russia to carve a chunk of the territory for themselves, even though they were 30%, but still, they said it happened in the Balkans, they homogenized their states, we could do the same thing here in eastern Anatolia as well. And when the war started, the Armenian members of the Ottoman Parliament, they all left Istanbul and convened in Tbilisi, the capital of Georgia. At that time, it was the major Russian military center. The Russian military command was in Tbilisi for the entire Caucasus region. And these Ottoman members of the parliament, the Armenians, they formed volunteer units in the Caucasus made out of Ottoman Armenian citizens to fight on the side of Russia. And according to, again, Armenian scholars, we are talking about 75,000 Armenian of Anatolia converged and created 6 different volunteers units to fight with the Russians against their own state, the Ottoman Empire. And we are talking about the 1914 and 1915, and during this period, the Ottoman Empire fighting in Basra against the British, and they are fighting in Egypt against Britain as well, and there was another Gallipoli going on that the British, the French, they are trying to open a way to Russia to provide a much better aid to the Russian economy and Russian military as well. And then you also have now 30% of the population in the process of rebellion, and the Armenian elite and the members of parliaments now totally allied themselves with Russia. So what was the common policy during World War I when a large chunk of population allies with the enemy? The common policy, what the Ottomans learned in the Boer War or in Philippines or in Cuba was counterinsurgency. Counterinsurgency means that how do you control insurgent population? The dominant policy or the pattern was to remove the population because the Ottomans don't have military to provide the protection in Anatolia. So the decision was, due to economic reasons and military reasons, because of the cooperation and collaboration of minority with the Russia, to remove this population to other Ottoman provinces in Damascus, Lebanon, Baghdad, and Syria. So this was the decision, was to relocate or deport or remove the entire Armenian population from the war zone to other Ottoman provinces because of failing state structure, because of lack of resources, because Ottoman Empire was under blockade of Britain and France. There was a major food shortages, failed healthcare. 40% of Armenian population, I would say close to 500,000 to 600,000 Armenians perished, killed, and murdered. Some of them died of hunger and health diseases. So it was a major catastrophe for Armenian population. But during that time, 30% of the Ottoman army also died because of hunger and healthcare and number of other issues as well. So what we have here, a tragic event, what happened here. But the Ottomans, they didn't know, especially the young Turks during the World War I, what informed their mind, their strategy, very much what they experienced in the Balkans. That they realized that the European imperialist powers are now determined not to allow them any land to live. In fact, Anatolia was occupied, as you know, during the World War I, Istanbul, Izmir, almost all major cities were occupied by Britain, Greece, Italy, France, Russia. What you have here, a tragedy, I would say, and a local massacres of Armenian population as well. In Diyarbakir was the worst case. And some of the Kurdish tribes, some of those who draft dodgers who run away from the army, that was also one of the major problems, the domestic insecurity. So we have a major disaster took place in Anatolia, and the question is now what to do. I think what needs to be done, this issue needs to be studied by historians because Russian archives just became available. The Ottoman archives are open, but the archives in Armenia are not open. But what we are seeing is that rather than leaving this issue, this human tragedy, to historians and allow Turkish and Armenian populations to debate and discuss, what we see some powers, including European powers, are trying to manipulate use and misuse this human tragedy as a political tool to exclude and dehumanize Turkey and Turks, unfortunately. That this is not a debate about the history, but I would say it is very much a debate about current politics, current configuration of forces, both in Europe and also an attempt to, in a way, exclude, otherize, and I would say to some extent also dehumanize Turkey. And I will end my talk here, and then we will continue with Evelyn's question. Yes. Thank you. I think it was longer than you expected.
Okay, thank you very much for your very interesting lecture. I think no one noticed that it was a little longer than we agreed to before, because it was really captivating. Voila, did that help? No? Wait, give me one more try. Yeah, okay, that will switch off rather quickly. Let me ask the first question targeting the comment that you ended your presentation with, that the conversation about genocide is also a political strategy of contemporary actors, and that it serves to dehumanize Turkey and the Turkish people. And I actually have a quote here from one of your articles that says, Islamophobia and Turkophobia are fully integrated into the discourses of the genocide thesis, and that the Armenian genocide discourse is used to perpetuate the image of the terrible Turk and to undermine the legitimacy of the Turkish Republic and to keep Turkey out of the European Union. So this is what you just said in your own words. And the question I have, coming from a very German perspective, obviously, is that we had the opposite momentum in our history in the founding of the Federal Republic of Germany. That it was actually the confronting our past very, very aggressively and very openly. Of course, not right after the Second World War. It took a lot of time for us to do so. Served to actually legitimize the new country and the new republic. So it was very much the opposite momentum. And I think from a German perspective, looking at the history and the discourse, what might delegitimize the Turkish Republic is much more the inability to confront the past, or, of course in limited terms. I'm not saying there is no confrontation, there is no addressing of the past, but probably some people would argue that it is still a limited capacity to do so. So how do you explain, or why would you actually argue the opposite way from what we experienced in Germany?
Thank you. I think this is the main question, and I think this was the main issue, your question. Thanks again. I think there is the politics of genocide in the sense that there are attempts by different circles out there to use genocide to rewrite the founding philosophy of republic, to argue that Turkey created as a result of something like Holocaust. I think the main problem here is that the Germany, they are very normal that they look at the world and different histories from their own perspective. But that perspective doesn't help Germany to understand, let's say, Great Britain or Russia or Turkey. In other words, my perspective will not help you to understand your case. In other words, I think these are not the same patterns of state formation in the sense that there is an Islamophobia, not new, but the roots of Islamophobia, according to Edward Said, who wrote the famous book on Orientalism, that does otherize in Muslims, but does otherize in Muslims very much also informed by otherizing the Jews, that this whole discourse, the Christian discourse about Jews very much informed later on the discourse on Muslims, that they are other. And in the case of the Jews, certainly Europe had different ways of dealing with the Jewish question. But with the Islamophobia, there's something, I see it similar to anti-Semitism, but not in the same intensity. I think the Muslim situation is much better than what happened to, unfortunately, Jews. But this Islamophobia and Turkophobia, they are integrated, that there's fear of Islam and fear of Turks. But the best definition of the Turk, according to me, provided by Milosevic and Karadzic during the ethnic cleansing and mass killing against the Bosnian Muslim population, Karadzic and Milosevic said, you Turks, go back to Anatolia. In other words, in the European historiography and in European consciousness, Turk is someone who is Muslim. Even in Latin America, the Arabs are called today El Turcos. Again, this Islam and Turkishness is very much co-determinant in the European understanding of historiography. So I would say this, let me go back to, in the 19th century, the British Prime Minister Gladstone, he was an ardent Islamophobe and Turkophobe as well. And he led a major campaign. He said, bag and baggages, we European Christians must determine to get rid of Turks from the Balkans. This was his own discourse and the Turk and Muslims were labeled as yellow race because there were racial categories, and the Turks were not considered as Caucasian, but rather the yellow. They belong to Asia or Asiatic civilization. So I think this is one of the important discourse. And I would say it would be a big mistake from an historiographical perspective, from the perspective of historiography, a big mistake to compare what happened to Armenians and what happened to Jews. So I think the Germans, in fact, and should, and did the right thing by confronting their own history, given the genocide means a killing group of people because of their identity. And the Jews did not collaborate with occupying Russian troops. Jews did not arm and try to kill the sovereign. The Armenians had a number of attempts, even some successful one. The Jews were murdered, the Jewish population murdered because of their identity, not because of their military or political activities. The Jews did not threat the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Germany. I think the Armenian case is very different. Yes, there are a number of massacres. It was an Armenian case could be compared what happened to the Muslims in the Balkans. But I think the Holocaust is something very different. So to force Turkey to say that, look, we Germans, we confronted our past. I think the Turks should confront their past as well, but not the German model is not helpful model for the Turks. Turks, in fact, and should confront. They forgot what happened to them in the Balkans. They forgot what happened to them in the Caucasus. And the Turks also had a very bad policy to recognize the suffering of Armenians. I think this must be recognized. I think there are a number of steps the current government took on this issue. I think they did something right. At least the current president issued a statement of that they called what happened as an inhumane act to the Armenians. But we should let it to Turkish society to discuss and debate this issue, rather than outside forces are trying to dictate a certain political program or certain political project.
Let me just jump in here before you start another lecture. Okay, thank you. A few remarks, maybe. I think, you know, we are Germans, we are Americans, we come from different backgrounds. We all discuss these issues today, partly because genocide is a concept that figures in international law. It is not domestic law. It does not only concern one nation, but humanity as such. So I think humanity as such should discuss these issues. We are all asked to confront the human past. And Turkish history is just as much as what happened on the Balkans is part of a collective history that we all have a share in. Also, as Germans, we are very much remembered these days to confront our role in what happened to Armenians in those years. Because we, of course, they were our allies, we had much influence, we actually helped to build the railways that were used to deport large parts of the population to the killing places, to places where massacres took place and where people died from hunger. So I think we also do have, just because we have a very strong role in these events, we have a duty to also discuss them. I think you're perfectly right, and I think it is important to note that there is Islamophobia today in Europe, unfortunately, not least of all places in Germany. I might also add that I think, to quote Milosevic and Karadzic, is maybe not the representative voices, is not to quote the representative voices of European consciousness. But maybe we can talk a little more, and you've just came to that in your last remarks, the politics of memory of the Turkish government today. You said there have been important steps of the current government, yet at the same time on Friday we had an event that was staged to commemorate the victory of the Ottoman forces in the Battle of Gallipoli. We have school books in Turkey which do not address very openly what happened in during that time. So. And you also mentioned that all Ottoman archives are open to researchers. That is not the information I gathered in my research, especially the military archives. But so maybe we could discuss a little bit what the politics of memory should be regarding these issues.
Since we all talk about the genocide, there are three competing and conflicting definitions of genocide. To label certain event, whether it's a genocide or not, it depends on the definition, what you mean. Genocide is a legal term. It is a legal term in international criminal law. And international criminal law is retroactive, that it does not cover the past events in that sense. And the genocide, coined by Raphael Lemkin in 1943, and we are talking about the events in 1915. And the genocide is a crime of genocide. We are talking about a crime, and whether an act is a crime or not, according to UN Convention, it must be determined by an international court. And according to legal definition of genocide, there are 3 genocides in the world, not 4. These three are Holocaust, Rwanda, and Bosnia-Herzegovina. There was a major case in the International Court of Justice. Croatia took Serbia to the court, and the decision came out last January, this year. And according to the International Court of Justice decision, it said, yes, there was ethnic cleansing, yes, there was mass killing, and all these acts took place in Croatia by the Serbs, but the court said it did not constitute a genocide, but war crime or crime against humanity. There are three types of crime in the international law: genocide, crime against humanity, ethnic cleansing, rape enters into the second category, the crime against humanity. Third, war crimes. So the genocide, I would say, by lawyer, it is by law that not the act itself, but the subjective aspect is so critical to define the crime. There must be a specific intent to murder and get rid of ethnic, religious, national, or racial group. So the act in itself does not constitute a genocide. This is, again, the International Court of Justice ruled so far after 1943. International Court of Justice, The Hague, had two opportunities to issue a judgment to interpret the law. One was the Bosnia-Herzegovina in 2007, and the court said only what happened in one town constituted genocide, not the events in the rest of Bosnia-Herzegovina. The second was in 2015. This year, the Croatia versus the Serbia court ruled and said it was not a genocide, but crime against humanity and war crime. This is what the court ruled. Now, this is the legal definition. Then you have the second definition. Second definition is very much the Association of Genocide Scholars and some social scientists and historians use. According to the second definition, if any ethnic, religious, racial group destroyed in a particular territory, let's say what happened to Native Americans, or what happened to the Muslims in Greece, according to Raphael Lemkin, he lists 49 genocides also against the Muslims in Greece. Raphael Lemkin also cites Atatürk's reforms as a cultural genocide, because I have a PhD student, he is now writing his dissertation on Raphael Lemkin and his definition of genocide. So the second definition is very much like ethnic cleansing, and what you see the German parliament, Pope Francis, the mayor of Istanbul, or municipality of London, this is not their business to evaluate a crime. This is the task must be carried out by court. And so far, we have only one court decision about 1915, the Armenian case. It is the decision by European Court on Human Rights, the decision known as Perinçek versus the Switzerland, and the European Court on Human Rights ruled and said the Holocaust is an established historical fact, whereas Armenian case is a historical debate. And this debate should go on, and these two issues are not comparable. This is the decision of European Court on Human Rights. And I think Germany and other European countries should respect the decision of the court. I think this is something very important. And by second definition, the definition of genocide by Association of Genocide Scholars, they look at the outcome, not the intent. They say, well, my God, there used to be a group of people used to live in Berlin. Now they don't live there anymore. It is a genocide. They go by outcome rather than the motive or the special intent. This is the second definition. And there is also a third definition of genocide. The journalist or some politicians, according to Obama, what is going on in Libya, President Obama, labeled as genocide. Turkish President Erdogan labeled what Israel did to Palestinians as genocide. And others, they labeled what is going on in Syria, which is a civil war, unfortunately, ethnic cleansing. According to journalists and many people, they labeled it as genocide. According to Catholic Church in the United States, they are very anti-abortion. They consider abortion, their label is stop the genocide, because they are against abortion. So this is the third definition of genocide. So since the genocide is a legal term, we should leave it to the court. And in Europe, if Europe is going to build a new consciousness, it should be based on the rule of law. And so far, we have a decision of European Court on Human Rights. And I would expect, it's not the job of Pope Francis to label why the same Pope didn't care the suffering of Bosnian Muslims. I have to raise this question. Why Pope ignores the suffering of what happened in Bosnia-Herzegovina? Catholic Church didn't act. All of a sudden now, Pope Francis, because he wants to be the leader, and this also created an opportunity for him to be the leader of the Orthodox as well, he wants to now play this role. I think this doesn't help. This is not a religious conflict. This is an issue of the law, and we should leave it to the court. It is an issue of the historians. Let historians to debate and discuss. It is why German parliament doesn't work what happened to the Bosnian Muslims. Why German parliament has not issued any statement about the Crimean Tatars or Circassians, but they want to deal what happened 100 years ago. I think it's not a history. It is not the law. It's very much, I would say, about the current politics. I think this does not have the debate in Turkey. This is the reason, when your last question, why Turkey is so defensive? Because of intervention from outside. If you leave the debate to Turkish society, let them to discuss. Leave them alone. Let the Turks to educate each other, rather than German parliament, the French parliament, or the European parliament wants to put their finger in it. This is not a matter, this is not their business. It is certainly a business if it is going on now. But if you want to take a moral position, dear Pope, you should be fair on other issues as well. But he wasn't. And I think the Pope's statement really did not help. The Pope statement, one of the reasons in the Gallipoli ceremony, you have many more Muslim leaders because of Pope's statement. And the president of Pakistan said, we expected Pope to be fair, not to ignore the suffering of Muslims. And in the United States, where I come from, the Association of American Muslims issued a statement, and they also criticized the Pope, that the Pope should not turn this into a religious conflict. It should be left to historians and the courts to make their own final decision. The last issue about the archives, you are right. Unfortunately, the military archives in Turkey are not open. They only give access to certain people close to ideologically, politically, and I think this is a big issue. But the other rest of the Ottoman archives are open. German archives are open. British archives are open. Russian archives are now open as well. But the archives in the Republic of Armenia are not open. I was in Yerevan. I said, why? They said, we don't have money. And I think they are right, too. They are financially in very bad shape. But you have a point that the archives must be open. And only the Ottoman, the state archives are open, but the military archives are, again, it is open to certain people, selected people. I think this is not fair. and it should be open. But I would suggest you 2 new books came out from Harvard University Press, one from Harvard, one from Cambridge. Both of them are based on the Russian archives, because Russia played the most important role during this conflict. One is by Sean McMeekin, a wonderful book, The Origins, Russian Origins of World War I, Harvard University Press. Second, Michael Reynolds, a professor from Princeton, his book published by Cambridge University Press, Shattering of Empires. These 2 books, on the basis of the Russian archives, their conclusion, what happened in the Caucasus, they say very similar to what happened in the Balkans, and they clearly indicate the Armenian collaboration with the Russian army, but I agree that the Ottoman military archives should be open.
Okay, thank you. I might follow up on your comments and on my previous question also. I think we shouldn't probably debate too much what the Pope said and what he shouldn't have said. I think it's probably not useful for the purpose of tonight's discussion, even though it is of concern to many people, and maybe rightly so. I think one problem that people have, and that I actually have, with describing the events that took place as a response to a security problem, as a response to Armenians under the control of the Russian Empire, is that, and you mentioned that figure in your presentation, and I do not have the knowledge to assess its correctness, so I'll trust you on that, that 75,000 Armenians were involved in a revolt against the Ottoman rule. One question that I think needs to be addressed is why? Why were they willing tools of a Russian aggression against the Ottoman Empire? And I think when you make the argument, then this question should be at center stage. What was their motivation to wage war against their own state? Also, why is it an appropriate response to a security problem to inflict death on close to 1 million people, many among them children, women, elderly, that didn't pose a security threat? Why were people from all over the Ottoman Empire deported, and not only from the border region? So the security argument, I think, has certain limits, and I think these limits have to be clearly stated. And I think the question I have, because we have you here as an expert also on the history of the Balkan Wars and the radicalization of the Young Turks, is that how, as you describe in one of your articles, how could a radicalization happen to such an extent that what you claim was a civic patriotism of the Young Turks initially turned into an ethno-nationalism or religious nationalism? Is that credible, given the extent of the events that followed?
Again, just last statement about the Pope. Sorry. I think the Pope's statement was a game changer. It made Turkey more defensive. I had expected a more different statement from Ankara, but I think statement by Pope and intervention by other parliaments made Turkey put Turkey on a defensive mood. I think this is why it is an important issue. The second, these 75,000 volunteers, these are Ottoman Armenian citizens, and parliament members of the Ottoman Armenian representative within the Ottoman parliament also moved to Tbilisi and organized the resistance. Ottoman Empire was falling, collapsing. It was, again, the German military and German embassy in Istanbul, they were against alliance with Ottoman Empire, because Ottoman Empire lost the First and Second Balkan Wars in 1912 and 1913, and the military and diplomatic reports were against any alliance with Ottoman Empire, but the Wilhelm, he had more faith in the declaration of jihad than Ottoman Sultan. He thought that the alliance with the Ottoman Empire, the Wilhelm II, would play an important role in India and Russia. The Muslim population will rise, and they will create a big problem for the British and Russian and French imperial powers. And so it was a collapsing state. It could not even pay the salaries of the military officers, and the capitulations were very much ruined the Ottoman economy. And one of the major reasons why Ottomans also decided to enter the World War I, to ally with Germany, the Ottoman demand from the German side was to support us when we end the capitulation. Before Ottoman Empire entered the war in December 1914, the first act after the declaration of alliance with the Germany was to get rid of, end the capitulations, because that totally ruined and turned the Ottoman Empire into a semi-colonial entity. So I think this, financially, it was a worse situation. And the Ottomans also asked Germany to send, I think, 4 million lira help so that they can pay the salaries of the military personnel in Anatolia. So these are the conditions we are talking about, that still the state is trying to cope with a major refugee population after the Balkan War. And now you have 75,000 Armenians allied with Russia, and they are fighting on the Russian side, and Armenians, again, from my own perspective, they made a rational decision to ally with Russia because no one expected Ottoman Empire to survive and live. So they said, this is our opportunity. And the Bulgaria and the other Balkans, they gained their independence with the help of the major alliance with the major European powers. Now we must, and also at that time in World War I, the Tbilisi, today's Tbilisi, Georgia, used to be 60% Armenian, the Georgia. And the Georgian economy, the politics, very much dominated by Armenians. So most of the Russian commander in the Caucasus front were Armenian as well. So when the Russia started to move toward Caucasus in 1805, it used to be Persia under the Persian Empire, and they first, in 1805, they captured Georgia, and then they gradually moved to Yerevan and then the Baku and down there. Armenian population, Armenian church always collaborated with Russia. So the center of the Armenian church was in Russia. So that attracted, and Russia also promised them more. And another side of the story, Ottoman Empire totally failed after 1903 to provide a basic security, law and order in Eastern Anatolia. So the Armenians were left to in the hand of the gangs and tribal warfare in the east. So the state could not fulfill its basic function. So the population said, well, since the state doesn't provide my basic security, since Russia is making more promises, moreover, all the Russian military commanders are used to be Armenian, it made sense for them to ally with. So there is both external and internal pressure to ally, or incentives to ally with Russia, okay? And when they allied, and the Ottoman Empire did not have, best policy could be to internal police force to be in major towns and prevent any collaboration of the population with in the war situation. Ottomans did not have manpower or resources for domestic security. The most economically reasonable policy was to deport the population, and I agree with you that deportation was inhumane. But in 1914, it was first Russia deported around 500,000 Muslims from Caucasus, because they also worried the Muslim Caucasian population collaborating with the Ottomans. First they pushed, and the Enver Pasha's, actually he suggested the Talat Pasha to move the Armenian population toward Caucasus, not to the south, so let them to move to Russia. But so what I am trying to say that this deportation or relocation, it was a common policy during Russia did against the Jews, as you know, in World War I. There was a major deportation of the Jewish population that Russia, because they were suspicious that the Jews were going to collaborate with Germany. They did the same thing. But the Ottoman Empire...
Why did the deportation
of children,
Armenians result of women and children was included, and why resulted this particular deportation in hundreds of thousands of deaths, whereas the deportations from the Caucasus weren't as, they didn't have such grave consequences?
In the Ottoman Empire, again, we are talking about a state military without health care, and the Ottoman Empire was under the under the blockade, and there was a major food shortages. Eastern Anatolia didn't have major roads. The Berlin-Baghdad railroad did not go to the Caucasus because Russia didn't want any railroad to be built on the Caucasian border because they worried that will give access to Germany or to Britain. So we are talking about the railroad. Only the Armenians from Istanbul or other places, they were, you are correct, carried and sent through the railroad. But most of the Van, Kars, Erzurum, these areas didn't have railroad, even proper road. We are talking about pre-industrialized state without lack of resources, and it resulted, unfortunately, according to Günter Louis, he did one of the best study, with the major that men and women. The question is, why do you deport the men and children, women and children, leave them? But that was the common policy, I would say, common strategy. This was the case what the Russians did. This is what the Britain did. This was a common pattern, and the Ottomans very much followed that common pattern. Also, this was the policy what happened after the Second Balkan Wars. If you read the Carnegie report about the Balkan Wars, Carnegie report issued in 1914, before World War I, it details the killing, the massacre, deportation, ethnic cleansing of the Muslim population. So what I'm trying to say, that this is why we have to start in the Balkans. The mindset. The young Turks were not nationalist. They were empire saver. They tried to protect and save the empires. The nationalism, so-called Turkish nationalism, is the baby of Mustafa Kemal. It was Mustafa Kemal imposed nationalism on population, not the young Turks or the Talat, Enver or Jamal. Their main concern was to save the state, protect the empire, not to create, homogenize the population.
Okay, maybe we'll leave it at that and open
okay.
questions for the audience. Yeah?
That's
Ich habe Ihnen versprochen, dass Sie auch Gelegenheit haben zu fragen, und meine eigene Neugier ist zwar noch nicht erschöpft, aber ich möchte mich doch an mein Versprechen halten. Also bitte ich um Handzeichen, falls Sie eine Frage haben. Ja, hinten in der vorletzten Reihe. Gibt es im Moment ein Mikrofon, damit die Dolmetscherinnen Sie auch hören können?
In English or auf Deutsch? What? I will do it in English because you will understand me. I think in Europe, two facts, they are completely ignored in the whole debate. You mentioned one fact, which is the decision of the human rights courts in the case Perinçek, Switzerland. And I think this is very important to enlighten the European public about this court decision, because it's a historic court decision. Because it's completely ignored in Germany and in the German media and in the whole Europe. You just superficially summarized it, so maybe it would be great if we can deepen it more. And second, in the German parliament, the name Hrant Dink was mentioned, the murdered Armenian of Armenian descent. As you know, 9 months before he was killed, he was talking in Malatya, in his home city, and there he said, he made a self-criticism. He said, unfortunately, we Armenians, we were instrumentalized by imperial powers. We were instrumentalized by Russia, England, and France. They promised us a state, but actually they had their own economic, political interests in the region. And in the end, what we got was mutual massacres, which we also agree. I mean, there were mutual massacres, this is right. But then he gave a warning to the Kurdish people, and he said, listen, my Kurdish friends, I anticipate, unfortunately, there is a similar project with you now. The United States, they want a Kurdish state in the region. And now this time, they want to instrumentalize Kurdish people for the sake of their own economic, political interests, like what happened 100 years ago. And 9 months after this talk, unfortunately, he was killed. But this speech of Hrant Dink, this warning, historical warning, is completely ignored in Europe. So what's the importance of this? Because if a parliament decides to take a decision about a topic which is actually a topic of historians and a topic of courts, then this shows this is a clear fact that they want to politicize this historic event. Because there were international...
Thank you. I think we should leave some room for others.
Okay, good. Yeah, I think
just one thing, just for everybody to know, Hrant Dink was also a guest here in the context of the events with B.A.T.I, so just for you all to know that.
Well, I think that the Perinçek case is important in the sense that when Switzerland passed a law, and a law against racism, and within that law, the Swiss court also interpreted denial of genocide as a form of racism. And when Perinçek gave a speech in Switzerland, and he said that there was no Armenians suffered, and I agree with the historical facts, what happened to Armenians, but I dispute is that the legal description of these events, not genocide, is that. Then there was a court case as a denial of genocide, and a Swiss court found him guilty. Then he took his case to the European Court on Human Rights, and the European Court on Human Rights said that the Holocaust and the other cases that are established historical facts, and then you have historical debates. And the court said the Holocaust is an established historical fact, that it should not be challenged, it should not be disputed. If you try to dispute this established fact, that is a sign of racism and anti-Semitism. But the court, in the case of Armenian issue, it said the Swiss law not in line with the European Convention on Human Rights, and the court argued that 1915 events are historical debate, quote. This is what they said. It's a historical debate, and the debate is going on that neither parliament, and because the Armenian side and the Swiss lawyer, the state said, well, there are 20 state parliaments recognized. They said, yes, in fact, that's the case. But the parliaments are not in the position to determine which act is a crime or under what description. It's up to the court, not the parliament. I think this is a very important decision, and I think that Perinçek's court decision should inform some of our discussion as well. About the Hrant Dinç case, I agree with him that the issue is now instrumentalization of the past. We are not talking about the history. We are talking about the current power politics through using the past events. That the past, the history is very much instrumentalized for contemporary debate. And unfortunately, I would say that when the Turkish minority in Germany confronts some of the racism among some sector of German population or institution, people in and outside tend to compare it with whether the Turks are becoming another unwanted minority. I think there is some attempt on, this is how I interpret, that the German parliament's attempt is a way to disarm the Turkish minority, morally disarm them, put them in a situation of shame, and to say that, well, the Holocaust is not unique. You guys also did the similar event. I think this is how I read. Again, my reading is my own reading. It is open to debate and this discussion. But the Parliament has other issues to involve in it. I think it would be nice if German Parliament studies and issues a decision what to do the minority situation in Turkey, or how to help the Syrian refugees. Try to take the share of the burden from the Turkey a little bit, how to deal with this refugee problem in Turkey. Turkey has now over 2 million refugees. Not to get involved in an event which took place 100 years ago, but I think that this is unfortunately, this became a big issue because of Turkey's worse democratic situation. We have the democracy in Turkey is not going forward, unfortunately, it is going backward. And some European powers, both in Europe and in the United States, they are trying to use this as an opportunity or point out the lack of democratization and human rights situation in Turkey through dealing past events. And I think this is one of the reason also it plays an important role. This worsening democratic situation in Turkey provides an opportunity for those groups to bring these issues through and by instrumentalizing history.
Okay, thank you. Ich bitte um kurze, prägnante Fragen und brief replies, please, that we have, because we are running out of time. Okay, bitte schön. Mit Mikrofon bitte.
Wenn ich die erste Frage von Ihnen richtig verstanden habe, auf Englisch, meinten Sie, warum die Türkei sich nicht mit ihrer Geschichte befasst, konfrontiert, wie Deutschland es gemacht hat? War, glaube ich, die Frage, oder?
Die Frage war, warum, die Frage war folgende. Herr Yavuz argumentiert, dass die Konfrontation mit der Türkei von außen...
Ihre Frage...
Moment, meine erste Frage, ich erkläre es kurz. Dazu dient die türkische Republik zu delegitimieren, falls sie den Genozid nicht anerkennt. Beziehungsweise die Tatsache, die manche Leute sagen, ist eine Tatsache, dass es einen Genozid gab, dazu zu nutzen, um die türkische Republik zu delegitimieren. Meine Frage war, in Deutschland hat es genau andersrum funktioniert, nämlich das Geständnis sozusagen der Bundesrepublik, dass es diesen Holocaust gab und dass wir Deutsche dafür verantwortlich sind, hat die Bundesrepublik legitimiert. Das war die Frage. Okay. Was sind die Unterschiede?
Darauf wollte ich hinausschließen. Frage ich mich, würden sich die Deutschen ihrer Geschichte genauso stellen, wenn sie den Krieg gewonnen hätten und wenn es diese Nürnberger Prozesse nicht gäbe? Weil, soweit ich weiß, hat das deutsche Volk bis zum letzten den Holocaust eigens verleugnet, als sie sagen, sie wussten nicht, dass es diese KZ-Lager gab. Also sie wurden verurteilt im Gericht. Sogar die obersten Führer hatten die Möglichkeit, sich zu verteidigen im Gericht. Deswegen dieser Vergleich kommt mir ein bisschen, irritiert mich. Ja. Und eine ganz kurze zweite Frage, soweit ich weiß, beruhen die Behauptungen des Genozids auf also einer Grundpfeiler auf Lepsius' Schriften, Johannes Lepsius, dem Missionar. Und wenn ich ihn mal google, komme ich auf zweifelhafte Persönlichkeiten oder verfälschte Dokumente.
Sie meinen, Lepsius hat Dokumente gefälscht?
Auf gefälschte Dokumente, ob er oder vom Deutschen Reich aus, steht in Google irgendwie...
Welche Dokumente meinen Sie genau?
Die Schriftverkehr von Diplomaten, die in der Türkei stationiert waren.
Und wer hat die Dokumente... Also die Kommunikation zwischen deutschen Diplomaten und dem deutschen Außenministerium wurde gefälscht?
Darin steht im Grunde, dass diese Dokumente verfälscht wurden oder die Herausgabe von Lepsius nicht die wahren Dokumente sind, wenn man es googelt. Das wollte ich auch fragen, wie es damit steht. Ja. Danke.
Ja, zwei Fragen. Zu der ersten Frage kann ich vielleicht etwas mehr sagen als zur zweiten, da ich die Dokumente selber nicht gesichtet habe. Ich kann Ihnen aber vielleicht dazu sagen, dass der wissenschaftliche Leiter des Lepsius-Hauses in Potsdam gerade ein Buch zu diesem Thema herausgegeben hat, in dem er ausführlich die Quellen, die im deutschen Außenministerium lagern, ausgewertet hat und zu dem Schluss kommt, dass das deutsche Außenministerium sehr gut informiert wäre über diverse Quellen und nicht nur über den Schriftverkehr mit Herrn Lepsius, über das, was im Osmanischen Reich mit Armenien geschehen ist. Ich würde Ihnen einfach empfehlen, dieses Buch zu lesen und dann wissen Sie mehr als ich auch. Dann können Sie uns nochmal unterhalten. Zur ersten Frage, da haben Sie sicher recht. Also uns wurde die Konfrontation mit unserer Vergangenheit, uns Deutschen, sage ich jetzt mal, ich habe damit nicht so viel zu tun gehabt, aber wenn wir in solchen Kollektivformen sprechen wollen, können wir das jetzt mal machen, wurde uns das aufgezwungen, ja, von außen. Nicht nur durch die Nürnberger Prozesse, sondern auch durch die Kampagnen der Entnazifizierung zum Beispiel, die in den verschiedenen Besatzungszonen stattgefunden haben. Und das, denke ich, ist auch gut so. Also ich würde mich jetzt im Nachhinein als nachfolgende Generation gar nicht darüber beschweren, dass Außenstehende uns dazu gezwungen haben, unsere Vergangenheit aufzuarbeiten. Der zweite Punkt ist aber, dass der zweite Schritt, die Annahme dieser Aufarbeitung, ja, die Verarbeitung der Aufarbeitung, eigentlich eine Leistung war der Generation, die wir heute die 68er-Generation nennen. Das heißt, erst 2 Jahrzehnte später hat diese Aufarbeitung so eingesetzt, dass wir sie selber annehmen konnten. Das steht aber nicht im Widerspruch zueinander.
Ich wollte mal sagen, dass es eine Gerichtsverhandlung gab.
Ja, dann müssen wir uns fragen, hätte es in der Türkei Gerichtsverhandlungen geben sollen? Wir wissen, dass die Verantwortlichen nicht vor Gericht gestellt wurden, sondern zum Beispiel in Berlin noch ein gutes Leben gelebt haben, bis sie dann ohne Gerichtsverhandlung zum Beispiel auch in Berlin ermordet wurden. Das wäre dann die Gegenfrage. Wäre es besser gewesen, hätte es diese Gerichtsverhandlungen gegeben in der Türkei?
Ich wollte sagen, ob man diese Gelegenheit auch gegeben hätte.
Wem gegeben hätte?
Sprachen wir ja von der Legalisierung und so von den Gerichten.
Ja, vielleicht vertiefen wir das nochmal.
Weil im Gespräch Herr Yavuz ja von legalen Begriffen geredet hat, wo man diese Beurteilung den Gerichten überlassen soll. Darauf wollte ich hinaus. Dass es keine gerichtliche Entscheidungen in dem Sinne gibt über den angeblichen Genozid in Armenien, wie über den Holocaust. Darauf wollte ich hinaus.
Ja, ist das eine Frage?
Das war eine Ergänzung zu meiner Frage.
Okay. Ja, ich glaube, das ist etwas, was wir bedauern können, dass es nicht mehr Gerichtsprozesse gab, ehrlich gesagt. Ich glaube, es ist schwierig, sich auf ein Urteil des Menschengerichtshofs zu berufen. Das Urteil gab es natürlich, das ist ein Faktum. Ich glaube, dass es auch die gerichtliche Aufarbeitung hätte stärker stattfinden sollen und können.
Ja, aber meine Frage beruht sich nicht auf, ob es sie hätte geben sollen, diese Gerichte. Ja. Aber im Gericht gibt es ja auch eine Beweisdarstellung, eine Verteidigung und Beweise und Dokumente. Gab es diese oder gibt es diese Beweise, Dokumente zur Verurteilung auch im armenischen Genozid angeblichen? Das ist meine Frage.
Das ist eine Frage. A question you should take.
Well, I think there is one issue I want to. Turkey does not. There are some groups in Turkey do, but I would say majority of Turkey, at least the government of Turkey, does not dispute historical facts that we do, and they should, and I do, recognize the suffering of Armenians, and I also believe that 40% of Armenian population died and killed. So this is even Kamuran Gurun. He was a deputy foreign secretary of Turkey, foreign minister. He wrote a book. I would say his book is very important. He argues that close to 400,000 Armenians were killed and died during the relocation or deportation of Armenians. So the documents in the German Foreign Ministry or the military archives, Ottoman archives, they do show in Russia, Great Britain, the killing and suffering of Armenians. But the issue is here is that how should we describe this suffering, this catastrophe, this inhumane outcome of relocation? Who has, let's say I enter your house to steal your computer. In that process we have a fight and you die. You are dead. And then this is, we call a first-degree murder in the American legal system. But if I come to your house, because you are a German, I don't care your name, whatever your name is. But I come to your house to kill you because you are a German. That's what we call hate crime. Hate crime. Because my intent is to kill you because I hate your identity and your culture. This is in American domestic law, criminal law, called hate crime. I don't know how it's a system in Germany. So the genocide is something like hate crime. Enter in someone's house to some group because of their identity. And whereas first-degree murder, second-degree murder, these are different. Again, in the international criminal law, you have the genocide, crime against humanity, and the war crime. These are very much different categories. So the archive so far, it helped to find out how people, what happened, and how happened. But those 400, 600,000 Armenians killed and died in the process, I think the issue is here the legal description, and I think Turkey's main debate is that Turkey dispute the legal description of these events, not the fact. This is the Turkey's paper also in the Perinçek case. If you read the paper, you will find it very clearly. But the question is now forcing someone to confront the past. If in society you have no critical space, no intellectual left, no independent media, you must force that society to confront. I think this must be done. But if in a given society you have islands of criticism, you have an engagement going on, you leave that society alone and let it to cope and deal with its own situation. So the Germany after World War II, and because of the war, there were no critical spaces. So the United States had a moral mission in a way to force the Germany to confront. And also through that confrontation, they wanted to create some control. Whereas in the case of no one forced Germany to confront the Namibia, what happened? Did anyone force Germany? Or no one forced Germany what happened in Belgium after World War I. There are a number of books in United States, what happened in Belgium. It was very similar what happened to the Armenians. But the World War II and the Holocaust, I would say, according to European Court on Human Rights, it is something there. The other cases are debate and discussion. The Namibia, the Belgium, the Armenian case, these are debate. Whereas the Holocaust somewhere else too. But I also believe, as a Turk, we do have a moral responsibility. We in Turkey need to debate this, discuss this. I think that the government took a step. Maybe we should take a more step if we are left alone. Not others are trying to impose us their own interests, not politicizing this issue. I think that is the problem, really. Again, the German pattern and other cases are very different, but I would like to see certainly Germany to play an important role. For instance, now Serbia is agreed to become made a European Union, but no one forced Serbian Parliament to issue an apology. They did because of the pressure from, to some extent, Turkey, but again, the Bosnian side is not satisfied with that kind of statement. There's no pressure on Serbia and Croatia, and you were all alive and saw what happened on TV. It was a genocide alive going on. But some way, there is no single decision from the French Parliament about what happened to the Bosnians, or there is no decision about Rwanda. But there are a number of decisions about what happened 100 years ago. So this politicization of this event, it doesn't help to scholars. Again, this is an issue. The law should deal with it. The issues are not the facts. I think Turkey does not dispute what I read from the Turkish perspective on the court papers, that they say we do not dispute the facts, we dispute the legal description of these events. And the court, the European Court on Human Rights, again, this decision is appealed. We are still waiting to hear the appeal decision. Hopefully it will be out within 4 or 5 months. But at least, so this is the only decision we have, and we must and should respect European institutions, especially the court decision on this issue.
Gut. Ich denke, wir haben noch Gelegenheit vielleicht noch für eine Frage. Nur als kleiner Kommentar, ja, einen Moment. Ich denke schon... Yeah, maybe I'm addressing you, so maybe I'll do it in English.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. I think that European parliaments have addressed issues other than the Armenian question, but for example, in Rwanda, there is just no debate about what happened. It's so clear-cut, and there has been what do you call it?
Why do you think
there has
no
been a
debate
tribunal?
In Rwanda? Because they are bloc, or they are? Why do you think this is total silence on Rwanda? And I don't know whether there is any debate in the German parliament.
Because people were killed according to their ethnic belonging that was stated in their passport. I mean, there is no clearer case of genocide than that.
So then you are in Rwanda. So
yeah.
Then why the German parliament doesn't get involved in Rwanda, but they involve in the
because the Rwandan case is settled, whereas many people perceive, as you yourself, that the events that involved Armenians in the Ottoman Empire are not settled in the same way.
But it is settled in the court. It is not settled in the German parliament. Rwanda case.
The decision, as you just mentioned, has been appealed. So
Rwanda has a number of court. There's a special the court on Rwanda,
tribunal.
And so Rwanda is settled in the court. I think we should give the same opportunity and chance to Turks and Armenians to, since genocide is a crime, and the court should make that decision, not the German parliament, not the mayor of Berlin, not the Hollywood.
You made that point before. I just wanted to inform you that the German parliament and European parliaments do take on other cases of perceived injustices than just the events under discussion. So we had one more question over here. Yeah.
Ja, ich würde es gern auf Deutsch sagen. Nochmal zur Rolle des deutschen Parlaments. Sie haben deutlich gemacht, dass das keine Angelegenheit des deutschen Parlaments sei. Deutschland solle sich da nicht einmischen. Ich teile Ihre Auffassung nicht, weil in unseren westlichen Demokratien es üblich ist, dass Parlamente Resolutionen verabschieden. Und zwar sind es Resolutionen zu Ereignissen in der Welt. Und jedes Parlament, frei gewählte Parlament, hat das Recht, sich zu äußern, eine Meinung zu äußern. Es war keine Entscheidung, Sie sprechen von einer Entscheidung des deutschen Parlaments. Das deutsche Parlament hat sich geäußert. Ihre Interpretation, dass das deutsche Parlament unsere türkischen Mitbürger auch treffen wollte und beschämen wollte, finde ich unglaublich, muss ich Ihnen sagen. Das sind Mitbürger von uns und niemand im deutschen Parlament bei dieser Meinungsäußerung hatte die Absicht, unsere türkischen Mitbürger in irgendeiner Form zu beschämen. Dann eine weitere Frage. Sie sagen, man solle es den Historikern überlassen oder solle es Gerichtsentscheidungen überlassen, kann man so sehen. Nur mich würde mal interessieren, Ihre Meinung, sollte demnächst, was ja nicht ausgeschlossen ist, eine internationale Historikerkommission zum Ergebnis kommen, es war Völkermord, oder ein Gericht zum Ergebnis kommen, es war Völkermord. Wie würde sich aus Ihrer Sicht die Türkei dazu stellen?
Ich darf zum ersten Punkt noch ergänzen, dass auch deutsch-türkische Abgeordnete, deutsche Abgeordnete mit türkischem Migrationshintergrund die Entscheidung des Parlaments, die Meinungsäußerung des Parlaments mit unterstützt haben. Von daher schließe ich mich dem ersten Kommentar an, dass es tendenziös ist und hier ein Angriff auf unsere türkischstämmigen Mitbürger zu sehen. Also, Dankeschön für den Kommentar.
I think that the European Parliament has a decision in 1987 on this issue, and that was almost actually the latest decision of a European Parliament is much softer than what they issued in 1987. And German Parliament has a resolution in 2005, I believe, 90. And why now another resolution? Also, if the German Parliament issues a statement says, we recognize the suffering of Armenians and Muslims during the World War I, and we also would like to call Turkey to study and establish a joint historian and then respect the decision of that joint committee of historians. Or German Parliament also says we would like Turkey to respect the decision of the European Court on Human Rights, whatever the decision comes out, I would fully support it. I will say yes, indeed. But here, German Parliament wants to function as a court. Genocide is a legal term. Genocide is something like a hate crime in the American context. And the Turks, because the genocide is very much invented and constructed after the Holocaust by Raphael Lemkin in his book 1943. That was the first time. So the Turks, they feel very uncomfortable. Also, you have an international law, the convention, the UN Convention on Genocide, which provides a definition for the international law. And the same convention says who has right to determine whether the case in Rwanda or Yugoslavia constitute a genocide. And the convention says competent international court, like the International Court in Hague, or a special court created by the UN Security Council can decide. So it is not really the decision of Turkish Parliament, German Parliament, or the Greek Parliament, or a Belgian Parliament. And I fully agree with you that this was the proposal Turkey made, that we should establish an international committee of historians and respect that decision. This is the position. When was this issued a statement that it is a government official position? And I think the German Parliament really, Germany, could do a great job and help if Germany takes a role, and maybe your academy here, to bring the historians, the Turks, Armenians, or whoever they think, international historians who know this issue, and then give them a one-year period and say these are the archives and sources. And even though the international criminal law is not retroactive, but whatever decision we will apply the current law, international law, to the past event, whatever decision is there, we would like you to respect that decision. I think this would be an excellent proposal. I think Turkey will, what I hear from the Turkish side, they will respect this. But if the German Parliament says, well, my God, I am not only an assembly to make the law, but I am also a court. But international law does not give that authority and power to German, Turkish, or American, or Belgian Parliament to determine what act. If we let that to happen, Russia will list a number of events as genocide, Russian Parliament, then the German Parliament, then the Turkish Parliament. We are undermining international law. What we are doing, really, we are weakening the law which provides a civility at the international level. That is the international law. We should, I think, especially the Europeans, the European Union should be a community of law, not the community of the majority opinion. If the majority changes in the German Parliament in 20 years, if they take the totally opposite decision, is that the history? We don't write the history on the basis of the resolutions of the Parliament. But I am fully with you, with your suggestion that there should be an international historian committee, and let them to study, and whatever the decision they come, we should respect that.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think it's great to close on some reconciliatory remarks. The German Parliament probably does not aim to undermine international law because it is not a legally binding decision, but simply a resolution that they pass. But
even though it is not a legally binding to accuse someone else that you are a racist, you raped a woman without a court decision, I think this is what the German Parliament is doing. They are trying to politicize the issue and demoralize, dehumanize, this is how I read, dehumanize the Turks. And the intervention by Pope, again, it made the situation much worse. And I am fully with you that this should be studied with historians. Let's give opportunity to historians, German historians, Russians, American, Argentinian, let historians who know this topic to study. And then whatever decision they have, we should all respect. But before that, the parliaments, and we should respect the law, don't we? The European Court on Human Rights. Is it a joke, or should we take its decision seriously?
Good. I think I started my series of questions in connection with your very last comment in your lecture. I want to close with a comment on the first point you made, and that is the expulsion of Muslim population from Bulgaria, for instance, and other countries and countries in the Balkans. And I think unless we do not realize that what happened in that period is not only a loss of life, but also a loss of carriers of culture, of a shared culture, of Ottoman culture, of Bulgarian culture, of Balkan culture, we do not fully comprehend what happened. So it is not only to mourn the loss of life, it is also to mourn for all of us that part of our culture has gone amiss. I went to a concert in this past Saturday, actually, of a great performer of Sufi music. He used one of these flutes, and I don't recall what they're called. Oud. Okay, it was a wonderful concert, really inspirational. And he performed pieces composed by Greek and Armenian composers, and he said, I'm not doing this because we have the anniversary last Friday. Yesterday, it was the day before, Saturday, but because that was just the way it was. That was Ottoman culture back in the days, and I think we should realize that a lot more than just the loss of human life has a court, and that it is a loss we can mourn on all sides. So thank you very much. Vielen Dank. Thank you so much, Mr. Yavuz.
Thank you.
It was a great lecture, great discussion. Wir haben jetzt Gelegenheit, noch beim Getränk und beim Imbiss draußen zusammenzukommen und die Diskussion fortzusetzen.
Well, thank you.
Vielen Dank noch an die Dolmetscherin, das darf ich nicht vergessen, die uns die Unterhaltung überhaupt erst ermöglicht haben. Ja?